The little girl stood outside the biker bar for 11 minutes. She didn't move much, just stood there on the cracked sidewalk, clutching something brown and worn against her chest. 7 years old, maybe 70 pounds, soaking wet, and she had come to hire a bodyguard. Late September sunlight stretched across Whiskey Row in Prescott, Arizona. Tourists drifted from shop to shop, their comfortable shoes tapping against the century-old brick sidewalks. The smell of roasted coffee and leather goods floated through the dry desert air. No one noticed the girl, or rather, people noticed, but they didn't really see her. A woman in yoga pants and designer sunglasses passed first. She was talking loudly into her phone. "Tell them we'll need the table by 6, and make sure they have the Pinot." Her eyes slid briefly across the child. They paused on the bruises. Then they moved away. The woman kept walking. A retired couple followed, holding hands. They slowed slightly as they approached the Iron Horse Saloon. A row of motorcycles lined the curb outside the weathered wooden doors, chrome gleaming like blades in the afternoon sun. The couple guided their steps a little farther from the bikes. They didn't look at the girl. A young man with earbuds passed next, nodding to music only he could hear. Then, a mother pushing a stroller. Then 2 tourists with cameras hanging from their necks. 4 people. 6. 9. No one stopped. No one asked why a 7-year-old child was standing alone outside the roughest biker bar in Prescott. The girl wiped her nose with the back of her sleeve. Her pink t-shirt had once shown a smiling cartoon character, but the image had cracked and peeled after too many washings. Her jeans were too big, held up by a length of rope tied around her waist. Her hair hung past her shoulders in tangled strands. But her eyes were what stopped people if they looked long enough. Green, too serious for a child. Eyes that had learned something early. Adults couldn't always be trusted. In her arms, she held a teddy bear. The bear's brown fur had been worn thin in places. One black button eye was missing, leaving a small crater of loose threads. Someone had sewn a tear along its side with crooked stitches made from a different color thread. It looked like a repair done with love, but not much skill. The bear's stuffing had shifted, making it lean slightly to one side. The girl squeezed it tighter. Across the street, the Iron Horse Saloon door suddenly burst open. A blast of music and male laughter spilled into the afternoon. A man stepped out. Leather vest, tattoos running down both arms, gray threaded through his beard. He paused to light a cigarette. For a moment, his eyes scanned the street the way men do when they've spent years expecting trouble. His gaze passed over the girl, then stopped. His head turned slowly back toward her. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. The biggest, scariest biker on the block, and the smallest child standing alone in front of his bar. The man took a slow drag from his cigarette. "You lost, little bit?" he asked. His voice sounded like gravel, but there was something careful in it. Something gentle. The girl shook her head. "No, sir." The man studied her for another second. "Your folks inside?" Another shake. A flick of ash fell from the end of his cigarette. "You waiting for someone?" The girl tightened her grip on the teddy bear. "No, sir." Her voice was small, but steady. The steadiness caught his attention. Children who were scared usually sounded different. They cried. They stuttered. This one didn't. He dropped the cigarette onto the sidewalk and crushed it under his boot. Then he crouched down slowly until his eyes were level with hers. "All right," he said softly. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Lily Brennan. That's a pretty name." He tapped his chest lightly. "Name's Griffin. Some folks call me Hawkeye." Behind him, the saloon door opened again. 2 more bikers stepped outside, their conversation dying when they saw the scene. One of them started forward. Griffin raised a hand without turning. The man stopped immediately. Griffin looked back at Lily. "And who's your friend there?" He nodded toward the teddy bear. Lily hugged the bear tighter. "This is Mr. Buttons." "Mr. Buttons, huh? My grandma gave him to me before she died." She hesitated. "He's really valuable." Griffin felt something tighten in his throat. "Is that right?" Lily nodded seriously. "He kept her safe during hard times." The biker glanced briefly at the men behind him. Then, back at the little girl. "Lily May," he said carefully. "Why are you standing outside a place like this?" Lily looked at the motorcycles. Then at Griffin's vest, covered in patches and symbols people usually crossed the street to avoid. Then she looked down at the teddy bear. When she lifted her head again, her eyes had changed. There was fear there, but also something else. Determination. "I came here on purpose," she said. Griffin didn't speak. The street noise faded around them. "What for?" Lily took a deep breath. Then she held out the teddy bear with both hands. "I need to hire you," she said. The bikers behind Griffin went completely silent. For protection, Griffin stared at the worn bear in her hands. The missing eye. The crooked stitches. The last thing she probably owned that mattered. "This is all I have to pay," Lily said quietly. "But he's really valuable." Griffin felt something in his chest crack open. He looked at the bear, then at the tiny girl offering it like a treasure. And in that moment he understood something. This child had already asked the world for help, and the world had already said no. He took a slow breath, then extended his hand. "All right, Lily May," he said softly. "You got yourself a deal." The men behind him exchanged glances, because none of them knew it yet. But in a few hours, this quiet moment on a sidewalk in Prescott was going to start a war. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The little teddy bear rested in Lily's outstretched hands, its single remaining button eye staring up at Griffin like it was waiting for an answer, too. Griffin didn't take it right away. Instead, he studied the girl. Children usually cried when they were scared. They clung to adults. They begged. This one negotiated. "Sweetheart," he said quietly, "you don't have to pay us for help." The change in Lily's face was immediate. Her shoulders stiffened. Her fingers tightened around the bear. Tears rushed suddenly to her eyes. "No," she said, her voice shaking. "You have to take him." Griffin blinked. "Why?" "Because nothing worth having is free," Lily whispered. "Grandma said that." She pulled Mr. Buttons back against her chest protectively. "If you don't take him," she said, "you'll just feel sorry for me." The men behind Griffin shifted uneasily. Lily continued, her voice trembling but determined. "And tomorrow you'll forget about me." The words landed like a punch. Griffin had heard a lot of things in his life. Threats, insults, confessions shouted through whiskey and regret. But hearing a 7-year-old say that with complete certainty, that was different. He ran a hand slowly over his beard, thinking. Then he held out his palm. "All right," he said. Lily froze. "All right, what?" she asked cautiously. "All right, Lily May Brennan," Griffin said. "We've got a deal." The relief that crossed her face was so sudden it almost hurt to watch. But Griffin lifted a finger. "On one condition." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What condition?" "I'm not taking Mr. Buttons as payment," he said. Lily's face fell again. "But I'm taking him as collateral." She blinked. Griffin continued carefully. "I'll hold on to him for safekeeping." He pointed gently to the bear. "And when you feel truly safe, really safe, you can ask for him back." The girl studied his face carefully. Children were surprisingly good judges of honesty. Finally, she asked, "You promise?" Griffin extended his hand. "Where I come from, a handshake means a promise." Lily hesitated only a moment before placing her small hand into his. Her fingers disappeared inside his calloused grip. "Deal," she said. "Deal," Griffin replied. Then she placed Mr. Buttons carefully into his hand. The bear looked even smaller there. Griffin tucked it gently inside the inner pocket of his leather vest, so the bear's remaining eye peeked out. Lily watched every movement. Making sure the promise was real, behind Griffin, the saloon door opened again. More bikers stepped outside now, drawn by the strange quiet on the sidewalk. 6 of them in total. Leather vests, boots, tattoos, all staring at the little girl who had just shaken hands with their chapter president. Griffin turned back to her. "Now we've got business," he said. His voice changed slightly, harder, focused. "Tell me who you need protection from." For the first time, Lily looked uncertain. She glanced at the men behind Griffin, then back to him. Her voice dropped. "My mom's boyfriend." Griffin didn't move. "What's his name?" "Derek Thornton." The name hung in the air. "And what exactly does Derek do?" Griffin asked carefully. Lily swallowed. "He hurts my mom." Chains, the big biker with the stitched chain patches, let out a quiet curse under his breath. Griffin stayed very still. "How does he hurt her?" "He gives her pills," Lily said. "Lots of pills." "What kind?" "I don't know." Her voice grew smaller. She sleeps a lot now. The wind rattled a loose sign above the bar. Griffin crouched slightly closer. Has he ever hurt you? Lily stared at the sidewalk. Yes. The word was almost too soft to hear. The bikers behind Griffin shifted again, the mood around them tightening. How long has this been going on? Griffin asked. A while. Lily hugged herself. He told me 3 nights ago that I was next. For a moment, the entire sidewalk seemed to freeze. Cars passed. Tourists laughed down the street. But around Griffin and his brothers, the air had gone cold. Next for what? Griffin asked quietly. Lily's voice cracked. For the things he does when Mom is asleep? Chains swore again, louder this time. Griffin raised a hand without looking back. The man fell silent. Griffin forced his voice to stay calm. Have you told anyone else about this? Yes, sir. Who? My neighbor, Lily said. What did they say? She said I was making up stories. Griffin's jaw tightened. Anyone else? My teacher. And, she said, Derek, volunteers at church and I shouldn't tell lies. One of the bikers actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because sometimes anger came out that way. Anyone else? Griffin asked. I called the police once. That surprised him. How'd you do that? From the library. And what happened? They told me to stop prank calling. A long silence followed. 6 grown men stood on a sidewalk listening to the failure of an entire system described by a child who hadn't even finished 2nd grade. Finally, Griffin spoke again. So, after all that, he gestured around them. You came here? Lily nodded. Why? She looked up at him. The news says bikers are dangerous, she said. Griffin almost smiled. That's one way of putting it. But I figured something, Lily continued. What's that? She looked at the motorcycles lined along the curb, then at the patches on Griffin's vest. Dangerous to bad people, she said slowly. Might mean safe for good people. None of the men behind Griffin moved. The statement hung in the air like something sacred. Griffin reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed quickly. When the call connected, he said only a few words. Sarah, I need you at the saloon. He listened for a moment. No, he said. Not me. He glanced down at Lily. Someone who needs you more. He hung up and crouched again. Lily, he said gently, can you show me where you live? She nodded. It's only 2 blocks. All right? He stood and offered his hand. Then we're going to take a walk. Lily slipped her small hand into his. But before they moved, she looked up at him anxiously. Mr. Buttons. Griffin patted the pocket where the bear's eye peeked out. He's not going anywhere. She nodded, satisfied, and together they stepped away from the Iron Horse Saloon. None of them noticed the tourists watching from across the street, or the quiet way. 6 motorcycles started rolling slowly behind them, because somewhere just 2 blocks away, a man named Derek Thornton had no idea his life was about to collapse. The walk took less than 5 minutes. Prescott's historic streets slowly gave way to quieter residential blocks where the buildings were smaller and the sidewalks cracked more often. Tourist laughter faded behind them. The scent of coffee and leather disappeared. Here the air smelled like dust and old wood. Lily walked beside Griffin without speaking. Her small hand stayed inside his, steady but tense. Behind them, the low rumble of motorcycle engines rolled slowly down the street. Not loud. Just close, like distant thunder following a storm. They stopped in front of a pale yellow house. The paint had peeled so badly that patches of gray wood showed underneath. One shutter hung crooked beside a window that hadn't been cleaned in years. The grass in the yard had turned brittle and brown. The entire place leaned slightly to one side, as if it had grown tired of holding itself upright. But in the driveway sat something that didn't belong. A black BMW sedan, clean, polished, brand new. The contrast looked almost obscene, like someone had parked a diamond ring beside a broken shoe. Lily pointed toward the car. That's Derek's. Griffin felt Sarah's name already echoing in his mind. He glanced back toward the bikes, rolling slowly behind them. Chains caught his eye and gave a small nod. The brothers spread out along the street without saying a word. Just in case. Griffin crouched beside Lily again. Is he inside? She nodded. He stays home a lot now. Your mom? She's sleeping. How long does she sleep? Lily thought about it. Sometimes all day. Griffin stood slowly. The front porch creaked under his boots as he stepped forward. Before he could knock, the door swung open. A man stood there. Mid-30s, clean haircut, khaki pants, polo shirt with a small insurance company logo stitched over the chest. His face was handsome in the forgettable way of men who did well at church events and corporate meetings. He smiled automatically. "Can I help?" Then he saw Griffin's vest. The smile stopped halfway. His eyes moved past Griffin toward the motorcycles idling quietly along the street. The smile returned, but thinner now. "Yes?" he said cautiously. "I'm here to see Victoria Brennan," Griffin replied. The man's gaze sharpened slightly. "Victoria's resting," he said. "Whatever you're selling, we're not interested." "I'm not selling anything." Griffin stepped aside slightly. "So why is her daughter standing behind me?" The man looked down, only then noticing Lily. Something flickered across his face. Not surprise. Recognition. "Lily," he said softly. "Where have you been?" She didn't answer. She stayed behind Griffin. The man looked back up, irritation slipping into his voice. "You see what I deal with?" he said. "She runs off, makes up stories." Griffin didn't move. "She asked me to check on her mom." The man's eyes hardened. "I'm Derek Thornton," he said. "Victoria's boyfriend." Griffin nodded slightly. "Griffin Caldwell." Recognition sparked instantly. "Oh," Derek said. That small word carried a lot inside it. He stepped aside reluctantly. "Well, if you're so concerned," he said, "come see for yourself." The house smelled wrong the moment Griffin stepped inside. Not dirty exactly, just stale, like windows that hadn't been opened in weeks. Empty pill bottles lined the kitchen counter. Dozens of them. Orange plastic reflecting the dull afternoon light. Sarah arrived just then. Her Harley engine died outside with a sharp click as she stepped inside carrying a worn medical bag. She took one look at Lily's arms, and her expression hardened immediately. "I'm Sarah," she said gently to the girl. "Is it okay if I look at those bruises?" Lily glanced at Griffin. He nodded. Slowly, she extended her arms. Sarah's fingers moved lightly across the marks. Purple, yellow, green. Different stages of healing, finger-shaped. Her jaw tightened. Across the room, Derek leaned against the wall with his arms folded. "She's clumsy," he said smoothly. "Always has been." Sarah didn't respond. Instead, she moved toward the kitchen counter. The pill bottles caught her eye instantly. She picked one up, then another, then a third. Her face went still. Griffin recognized that look. "What?" he asked quietly. Sarah held up the bottles. "These prescriptions aren't in Victoria's name." Derek straightened slightly. "She sees multiple doctors. These belong to 3 different people," Sarah said calmly. Griffin turned toward him slowly. "Care to explain that?" Derek opened his mouth, then closed it. At that moment, another sound filled the house. A police radio crackled outside. Officer Ryan Foster stepped through the doorway. 15 years on, the Prescott police force had taught him how to read a room fast. His eyes scanned the bottles. The unconscious woman on the couch. The biker chapter president standing beside a 7-year-old girl. "What's going on here?" he asked. Derek spoke first. "These people forced their way into my home." Ryan looked at Griffin. The biker shook his head once. Door was open. Ryan nodded slightly. He'd known Griffin long enough to understand what that meant. Sarah held out the pill bottles. "Officer," she said quietly, "these medications are controlled substances." Ryan took them. "Read the labels. Then read them again." His expression changed. "Mr. Thornton," he said slowly, "I'm going to need you to step outside with me." Derek's mask cracked for the first time. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "You're listening to criminals." Ryan pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "No," he said calmly. "I'm listening to evidence." The metallic click echoed sharply through the room. Behind him, motorcycles idled quietly on the street. And on Griffin's vest, Mr. Button's single eye watched everything. The sound of the handcuffs closing still seemed to echo through the small house. Derek Thornton stood stiffly beside Officer Ryan Foster, his jaw tight, the calm corporate mask finally gone. The pleasant smile he'd worn earlier had disappeared completely. "This is harassment," Derek said sharply. "You're making a mistake." Ryan didn't raise his voice. "You're under arrest for suspected prescription fraud and possible child endangerment," he said, guiding Derek toward the door. "You can explain the rest downtown." Derek's eyes flicked once toward Lily. The look wasn't loud. It wasn't threatening. But it carried a cold promise that made Griffin's stomach tighten. "This isn't over," Derek muttered. Ryan pushed the door open and walked him outside. The low rumble of motorcycles greeted them like a wall of sound. 6 bikers stood along the curb beside their machines, arms crossed, silent and watchful. Derek froze when he saw them. For the first time that afternoon, he looked uncertain. Ryan opened the patrol car door. "Get in." The door slammed. The engine started, and a few seconds later the cruiser rolled away down the quiet Prescott Street. Inside the house, the silence felt heavy. Sarah knelt beside the couch where Victoria Brennan lay, half-conscious beneath a thin blanket. The woman looked worse up close. Her skin had the gray tint of someone who hadn't eaten properly in weeks. Her hair clung to her face in oily strands. Her eyelids fluttered as Sarah gently checked her pulse. "Victoria?" Sarah said softly. The woman's lips moved. "What?" Her voice came out slurred. "Who's there?" "It's okay," Sarah said calmly. "My name's Sarah. I'm a nurse." Victoria blinked slowly, struggling to focus. Her eyes drifted across the room. They landed on Lily. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the fog seemed to crack slightly. "Baby," she whispered. Lily stepped forward cautiously. "I'm here, Mom." Victoria tried to sit up, but her arms trembled too badly. "I'm sorry," she murmured weakly. "I'm so tired all the time." Sarah exchanged a quick glance with Griffin. She had already seen enough. "These medications are sedating her constantly," she said quietly. "She needs detox and monitoring." Almost on cue, the distant wail of an ambulance siren drifted through the open window. Chains appeared in the doorway. "Paramedics are here." 2 EMTs hurried inside, carrying equipment. They worked efficiently, checking vitals, shining a small light into Victoria's eyes, asking quiet questions she struggled to answer. "She's heavily medicated," one of them said. "We're taking her to Yavapai Regional." A stretcher rolled through the doorway. Victoria's eyes moved again toward Lily. "Don't go," she whispered weakly. Lily swallowed. "I'm not going anywhere." But Victoria was already drifting back into sedation. The paramedics lifted the stretcher carefully and wheeled it outside. The ambulance doors closed with a hollow thud. A moment later, the siren started again. Then the vehicle disappeared down the street. The house suddenly felt very empty. Griffin stepped onto the porch where Lily sat quietly on the wooden steps. Chains stood a few feet away, giving her space while still keeping watch over the street. The girl's eyes followed the ambulance until it vanished completely. "Is my mom going to die?" she asked. Griffin lowered himself beside her. His knees popped slightly. "No," he said gently. "She's sick because of the pills Derek was giving her. Doctors can help her get better." Lily nodded slowly. She seemed to accept information the way adults did, without drama. But then she asked the question Griffin had been expecting. "What happens to me?" The words hung between them. Before Griffin could answer, another car pulled into the driveway. A woman stepped out carrying a tablet and a leather folder. Patricia Woodward had the tired eyes of someone who'd spent 30 years inside the machinery of Child Protective Services. She took one look at Lily, then at the motorcycles, then at Griffin. "You must be Caldwell," she said. "That's me. I'm Patricia Woodward, CPS." She crouched down slightly so she could meet Lily at eye level. "Hi, sweetheart." Lily studied her carefully. Adults had been wrong about things before. "Hi." Patricia's voice stayed gentle. "I'm here to help figure out where you can stay while your mom gets treatment." Lily looked down at the porch boards. "Do I have any family?" Patricia asked softly. "Grandparents? Aunts? Uncles?" Lily shook her head. "Grandma died last year." "That's when Derek moved in," she added quietly. Patricia nodded. "I understand." She tapped on her tablet briefly, pulling up a database. "Then, we'll have to find a temporary foster placement until your mom is healthy again." Lily didn't respond right away. Her eyes lifted slowly. They landed on Griffin, on the leather vest, on the small teddy bear peeking out from the inside pocket, the single-button eye catching the sunlight. "Can I stay with the people who took Mr. Button seriously?" she asked. The question caught everyone off guard. Griffin felt his throat tighten. Patricia looked from Lily to Griffin, then to Sarah, who had stepped out onto the porch. "You two ever been foster parents?" Patricia asked. Sarah exchanged a quick look with Griffin. 2 years ago, she said. "Our nephew." Patricia tapped the tablet again. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Well, I'll be damned." "What?" Griffin asked. "Your certification never expired," Patricia said. She turned the screen slightly. Griffin Caldwell. Sarah Caldwell. Approved foster placement. Patricia looked back at them. "You still got an empty bedroom?" Sarah nodded slowly. "Yeah." Patricia glanced at Lily, then back at them. "Are you willing?" Griffin didn't answer immediately. He looked at Lily again, at the girl, sitting quietly on the steps, waiting, not begging, just hoping. Sarah's hand slid into his. "Yeah," she said firmly. "We're willing." Patricia nodded once. Then she looked at Lily. "Well, honey," she said gently, "looks like you might have just found yourself a place to stay." Lily stared at Griffin. Then slowly, she stood. Her hand reached toward his vest pocket. Her fingers touched Mr. Button's lightly. "You kept him safe," she said. Griffin nodded. "I said I would." Lily looked up at him. Then she gave a small, careful smile. And for the first time all day, she looked like a child again. By the time the paperwork was finished, the sun had already begun to sink behind the mountains. Patricia worked through the process with quiet efficiency, making phone calls, confirming records, sending digital forms through a state system that moved much slower than emergencies usually required. Griffin and Sarah signed where she pointed. Temporary emergency placement. Foster guardianship pending review. Home verification already approved. It took nearly an hour. Lily waited patiently the whole time. She sat on the porch steps with Chains standing nearby, the giant biker pretending not to watch over her while still blocking anyone from walking too close. At one point, she asked him a question. "How many motorcycles do you have?" Chains scratched his beard. 6 in our chapter here." Lily nodded thoughtfully, as if filing the information away. Inside the house, Patricia finished the last signature and closed her tablet. "That's it," she said. "Lily can stay with you tonight." Sarah let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Griffin looked toward the porch. Lily stood slowly when she saw them coming out. "So I'm going with you?" she asked. "For now," Sarah said gently. Lily nodded. She didn't cheer, didn't run forward. Children who had learned not to trust good news rarely celebrated too early. Instead, she asked the most practical question. "Can I pack my clothes?" Griffin and Sarah exchanged a glance. "Of course," Sarah said. Inside the house, Lily moved quietly through the small bedroom she had lived in. Griffin stayed near the doorway, watching as she opened a dresser drawer. There wasn't much. 3 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans that didn't fit well, 1 pair of sneakers with worn-out soles, a few school books, a spiral notebook with her name written neatly on the cover. No toys, no photos, no drawings on the walls. The only thing that looked loved was the teddy bear Griffin still carried. Lily placed her clothes into a small backpack she found under the bed. When she finished, she zipped it closed and slung it over her shoulder. "That's everything," she said. Sarah swallowed. "Okay." Outside, the street looked different now. More motorcycles had arrived. Word had spread quickly through the local Hells Angels network. Brothers from around Prescott had ridden in quietly, parking their bikes along the curb. Chrome gleamed beneath the evening sun. Engines cooled with soft ticking sounds. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Griffin spotted Chains talking with another rider near the sidewalk. When Griffin approached, the big biker lowered his voice. "News travels fast," Chains said. Griffin followed his gaze. 6 new bikes had joined the original 6. "Lawyer already involved," Chains added. "Derek?" "Name's Richard Blackwell," Chains said. "Phoenix attorney. Expensive one." Griffin nodded slowly. Of course, Derek had a lawyer like that. Men who hid behind respectable jobs usually knew how to protect themselves. "What's he doing?" Griffin asked. "Filing motions already. Claims you and the club intimidated witnesses." Griffin looked toward Lily. She stood beside Sarah near the truck, clutching the backpack straps. "Watching everything. This is going to get messy," Chains continued. "Let it," Griffin said quietly. Chains studied him. You sure about this, brother? Griffin didn't answer right away. Instead, he watched Lily climb into the back seat of the truck. Small, too thin, but somehow still standing. Yeah, he said finally. I'm sure. The drive north took 15 minutes. The Caldwell house sat among tall ponderosa pines outside town. The wood and stone structure blended naturally into the forest around it, quiet and sturdy. Sarah had already called ahead to prepare. Lights glowed warmly through the windows. When they pulled into the driveway, Lily stared at the house through the truck window. It's big, she said softly. Not really, Sarah replied with a smile. Just normal. Inside, the house smelled like pine wood and fresh laundry. Sarah led Lily down the hallway. This used to be our daughter's room, she said, opening the door. The bedroom was simple but bright. Clean sheets covered the bed, a quilt folded neatly at the foot. A small lamp sat beside the window where the forest stretched out into darkness. Lily stepped inside slowly. She ran her hand across the quilt. This is mine? She asked. For as long as you need it, Sarah said. Griffin leaned against the door frame watching. Lily turned toward him suddenly. Can I see Mr. Buttons? Griffin reached into his vest pocket and carefully pulled out the bear. Lily took it immediately. She hugged it tight against her chest. For a moment she buried her face in the worn fur, breathing in slowly. Then she did something unexpected. She handed it back. Griffin blinked. What's wrong? Lily shook her head. Nothing, but you should keep him. That's not how this works, Griffin said gently. You're supposed to get him back. Not yet, Lily replied. Her voice was calm, thoughtful. The deal was you hold him until I'm safe. You are safe here. Lily hesitated. Then she shook her head again. Derek said his lawyer would come. Griffin didn't deny it. He might try. So, I'm not safe yet, Lily concluded. The quiet certainty in her voice made Sarah's chest tighten. Lily walked over and placed Mr. Buttons back into Griffin's vest pocket herself. There, she said. That's better. Griffin studied the little girl. You planning something? He asked. Lily tilted her head. How many Hells Angels are there in Prescott? 6 active members, Griffin said. Lily thought about that. Then she looked out the window toward the dark forest. Derek knows lawyers, she said slowly. He knows important people. Griffin nodded. That's true. Lily looked back at him. You need more than 6. How many? Griffin asked. Her green eyes were steady. Oh, she said. All of them. For a moment, Griffin just stared at her. Then he pulled out his phone. He dialed Chains. Brother, he said when the line connected. I need you to start making calls. Chains paused. How many you thinking? Griffin looked at Lily again. She watched him without blinking. As many as will come, Griffin said. Across the hallway, Lily's room light glowed softly. And somewhere far away, motorcycle engines were about to start. The sound arrived before the motorcycles did. At first, it was just a distant vibration rolling across the Prescott Valley like faraway thunder. Early morning sunlight had barely begun to warm the courthouse steps when people started noticing it. Shop owners paused while unlocking their doors. Tourists slowed their morning walks. Police officers standing outside the Yavapai County Courthouse looked toward the highway. The sound kept growing. Low, steady, mechanical. Then the first motorcycle appeared. A black Harley turning slowly onto Montezuma Street. Another followed. Then another. Within seconds, the quiet street was filling with chrome and leather. Engines rumbling in disciplined formation. The riders didn't rev loudly or weave through traffic. They moved slowly, deliberately, like a procession. By the time the 10th bike arrived, people had begun taking out their phones. By the time the 20th arrived, someone inside the courthouse called for additional deputies. And by the time the 50th rolled into view, everyone understood this wasn't a coincidence. This was a statement. Motorcycles lined both sides of the street in careful rows. Men and women stepped off their bikes wearing leather vests stitched with the same unmistakable patches. Hells Angels. Some had ridden in from Flagstaff, others from Phoenix, a few from towns much farther away. No one shouted. No one caused trouble. They simply stood, waiting. Inside the courthouse, the mood had already turned tense. Richard Blackwell stood near the courtroom doors, speaking quietly into his phone. The Phoenix attorney looked exactly like the kind of man people expected to win, Arguments, perfect hair, tailored suit, polished shoes. Across the hallway, Griffin Caldwell leaned against the wall beside Sarah. His leather vest looked out of place among the polished marble floors and framed legal portraits. But he didn't seem uncomfortable. Neither did the men standing beside him. Chains, two more brothers from the Prescott chapter, and a few riders who had arrived before sunrise. Lily sat between Griffin and Sarah on a wooden bench. Her feet didn't reach the floor. She held a paper cup of hot chocolate Sarah had bought from a cafe down the street. The courthouse hallway buzzed with whispers. People kept glancing toward the windows. Is that really them? Why are they here? Is this some kind of protest? A young deputy approached Griffin cautiously. Sir, he said politely, do you have any idea how many riders are outside right now? Griffin shrugged slightly. Not exactly. The deputy leaned closer. Last count was over 100. Chains chuckled under his breath. Blackwell ended his phone call and walked over. His smile looked professional, but his eyes were sharp. Mr. Caldwell, he said smoothly. Interesting show of force you've organized. Griffin didn't move. No show, he said. Just people who care. Blackwell gestured toward the windows. Over 100 members of an outlaw motorcycle gang standing outside a courthouse while a custody case is underway. His voice lowered slightly. That could be interpreted as intimidation. Chains shifted beside Griffin, but Griffin spoke calmly. They're standing on a public street. Blackwell smiled thinly. We'll see how the judge interprets it. Lily watched the two men quietly. Adults often talked in complicated circles, but she had already learned to listen for the important parts. Blackwell glanced down at her. And you must be Lily. His voice softened artificially. Hello. Lily didn't respond. Blackwell crouched slightly. You know, he said gently, this whole situation could be very confusing for a little girl. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Blackwell continued smoothly. Your mother is very sick right now, and sometimes children misunderstand what happens inside a home. Lily looked directly at him. Her expression didn't change. You're Derek's lawyer, she said. Blackwell smiled politely. That's correct. So you're paid to say nice things about bad people? Chains choked on a laugh. Blackwell's smile tightened for a fraction of a second. Your mother's boyfriend has never been convicted of any crime, he replied calmly. Lily took a sip of her hot chocolate. He will be, she said. The hallway went quiet. Blackwell straightened slowly. I suppose we'll let the court decide that. Just then, a deputy opened the courtroom doors. All parties for Brennan custody hearing, he announced. Griffin stood. Sarah placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. Ready? Lily nodded. The three of them walked toward the courtroom. As they passed the tall courthouse windows, Lily glanced outside. Rows of motorcycles filled the street, more than she could count. Men and women standing quietly beside them, waiting, watching, not cheering, not shouting, just present. A wall of leather and chrome surrounding the building. She looked up at Griffin. Did they all come for me? She asked softly. Griffin looked out the window too. He hadn't expected quite this many. But the sight made something heavy settle in his chest. Looks like it, he said. Lily nodded thoughtfully. Then she said something that made Sarah stop walking. Well, Lily said calmly, Derek's lawyer is going to need a lot of arguments. She looked back at the street filled with bikers. But I think we brought more people than he did. Inside the courtroom, the judge was already taking his seat. Outside, the motorcycles kept arriving. When the courtroom doors opened again, the hallway noise spilled inside like water breaking through a dam. Reporters, camera crews, whispers bouncing off marble walls. Word had spread faster than anyone expected. The sight of more than 100 Hell's Angels surrounding the courthouse had already reached local news stations, and the media had arrived in force. Flashes popped from cameras as Lily stepped through the doorway beside Griffin and Sarah. Microphones lifted. Mr. Caldwell, is this a gang intimidation tactic? Are the Hell's Angels intervening in a custody dispute? Is the child safe with you? Chains moved immediately, stepping between the reporters and the small girl. Back it up, he said calmly. The reporters didn't push further. They knew when they were pushing their luck. But someone else was waiting near the courthouse steps. Amanda Winters stood at the center of a small crowd. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her sunglasses resting on top of her head like an accessory chosen for the cameras. Around her stood about 30 people holding signs. Protect our children. No gangs in Prescott. Family values matter. She spotted Griffin the moment he stepped outside, and her voice rose just loud enough for the microphones nearby to catch it. "This is exactly what we feared," she said confidently. "A criminal gang exploiting a vulnerable child for publicity." The reporters pivoted instantly. Cameras swung toward her. One journalist stepped forward. "Mrs. Winters, are you organizing a protest today?" Amanda nodded. "Our community has standards," she said. "Children belong in safe homes, not with criminals wearing gang patches." Behind her, several supporters nodded and raised their signs higher. The cameras loved it. Conflict always made good television. Griffin stood quietly beside Sarah, watching the scene unfold without reacting. But Lily had stopped walking. Her eyes focused on Amanda Winters. The woman kept speaking, her voice growing stronger with the attention. "These bikers are manipulating a frightened child," Amanda continued. "They're creating a media circus instead of letting proper authorities handle—" "Mrs. Winters?" The small voice cut through the noise. The crowd turned. Lily had stepped forward. Griffin started to move, but Chains placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Let her," he murmured. Lily stopped about 3 feet from Amanda. The difference in height was almost comical. Amanda towered above her in polished heels and expensive clothes, but Lily's green eyes didn't waver. "You know my teacher?" Lily said. Amanda blinked. Excuse me?" "Mrs. Walker," Lily clarified. "3rd grade." Recognition flickered across Amanda's face. "Yes," she said slowly. "Janet Walker is a friend of mine." Lily nodded. "I told her Derek was hurting my mom." Amanda shifted slightly. "And what exactly does that have to do with—" "She said I was lying." The reporters leaned closer. Cameras zoomed in. Lily's voice stayed calm. "I told her Derek was giving my mom pills that made her sleep all day." Amanda crossed her arms. "Sweetheart, sometimes children misunderstand. I told her," Derek said, "I was going to be next." The words dropped into the quiet morning air. Even the crowd behind Amanda fell silent. Lily continued. "She called you." Amanda's confident expression cracked slightly. "You told her Derek works for your husband's insurance company." Amanda's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Patricia Woodward stepped forward from the courthouse steps, tablet already in hand. "That part is accurate," she said. Every camera swung toward her. "Robert Winters is the regional director of Prescott Mutual Insurance," Patricia continued. She tapped her tablet. "And Derek Thornton was transferred here from California 3 years ago." Amanda's face had gone pale. Patricia read from the screen. "In California, 3 formal complaints were filed against Mr. Thornton by previous partners." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Each report describes the same pattern," Patricia continued. "Isolation, prescription abuse, financial control." Amanda's sign slipped slightly in her hands. "That has nothing to do with—" "It has everything to do with this case," Patricia said calmly. She looked directly at Amanda. "Your husband received those complaints." Amanda froze. "And instead of investigating," Patricia continued, "he transferred Derek to Prescott." The silence became heavy. Lily spoke again. "Derek looks like someone you should trust," she said quietly. She gestured toward the courthouse. "He wears nice clothes." Then she turned slightly and pointed toward Griffin. "Griffin looks like someone you shouldn't." The crowd followed her finger. Leather vest, tattoos, motorcycles, filling the street. "But Griffin keeps his promises," Lily finished. Amanda stared at her. He listened when nobody else did. One of Amanda's supporters slowly lowered their sign. Another shifted uncomfortably. The reporters didn't move. This was the moment they had been waiting for. Lily looked directly at the cameras. All those people out there came because one little girl asked for help. She pointed toward the street full of motorcycles. Derek couldn't even help the 2 people living in his house. Amanda's shoulders sagged. The confidence drained from her posture. For the first time, she really looked at Lily. At the bruises still faintly visible beneath her sleeves. At the thin frame, the tired eyes. Amanda whispered. The microphones leaned closer. "I'm sorry." She dropped the sign. It clattered softly against the courthouse steps. Without another word, Amanda turned and walked toward a silver Mercedes parked down the street. One by one, her supporters followed. Some left quietly. Others lowered their signs before slipping away. Within minutes, the protest had dissolved. The reporters turned back toward Lily, but this time their expressions had changed. They weren't chasing a scandal anymore. They were witnessing something else. A 7-year-old girl who had just dismantled an entire argument in less than 2 minutes. Chains leaned down beside Griffin. "Kid's dangerous," he muttered. Griffin smiled faintly. "Only to bad people." Lily turned back toward him. "Did I do okay?" she asked. Griffin nodded once. "Better than okay." He glanced toward the courtroom doors opening again. "Now let's see if the judge thinks so too." The courtroom doors closed with a heavy wooden thud. Inside, the noise from the street vanished instantly. Only the quiet hum of the overhead lights remained. Judge Harold Bennett adjusted his glasses and studied the room before him. He had been on the bench for nearly 20 years, long enough to recognize when a simple hearing had turned into something much bigger. This was no longer a routine custody review. To his right sat Richard Blackwell, calm and perfectly composed. His legal folders were arranged neatly across the polished table. To the left sat Patricia Woodward from Child Protective Services. Behind her sat Griffin and Sarah, and between them, Lily. Her small feet still didn't reach the floor. Judge Bennett glanced once toward the back rows of the courtroom. Nearly every seat was filled. Reporters, local residents, several bikers sitting quietly along the wall. No one spoke. Blackwell stood first. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, "my client Derek Thornton maintains his innocence regarding the accusations made against him." His voice carried easily through the room. "What we are witnessing here is a highly emotional situation in which a minor child has unfortunately become entangled in a conflict she does not fully understand." Lily didn't move. Blackwell continued. "The individuals currently attempting to assume guardianship of this child are members of an outlaw motorcycle gang with a documented history of criminal activity." He gestured slightly toward Griffin. "Mr. Caldwell himself has several prior arrests on record." A ripple of murmurs moved through the courtroom. Blackwell opened a file. Public intoxication, disorderly conduct, assault during a bar altercation 12 years ago. He closed the folder. "These are not the credentials of someone suitable to raise a child." Judge Bennett looked toward Griffin. "Mr. Caldwell?" Griffin rose slowly. He didn't rush to defend himself. "Yes, sir," he said simply. "I've made mistakes." Blackwell smiled slightly. "Indeed," Griffin continued calmly. "But none of those mistakes involved hurting women or children." The smile faded. Blackwell recovered quickly. "Your Honor, emotional appeals are not evidence." He turned toward the witness stand. "The defense calls Derek Thornton." A side door opened. 2 deputies escorted Derek into the courtroom. He looked different now. The confident corporate smile had returned, carefully reconstructed. His suit jacket had been cleaned and pressed. If someone had walked into the courtroom without context, Derek might have looked like the most respectable man in the room. He took the witness seat and placed his hand on the Bible. "I swear to tell the truth," he said smoothly. Blackwell approached him. "Mr. Thornton, can you explain your relationship with Victoria Brennan?" "We've been together for 2 years," Derek said. "And Lily? I've done my best to provide for her." Blackwell nodded. "Have you ever harmed either of them?" "Absolutely not." Derek leaned forward slightly, his voice full of concern. "Victoria has struggled with addiction issues for years. I've tried to help her get clean." Patricia Woodward's expression didn't change. Blackwell continued. "And the pills found in the home?" "Medication from friends who asked me to pick them up," Derek said smoothly. "Completely legal." Blackwell turned toward the judge. "Your Honor, this case appears to be built entirely on speculation and the testimony of a frightened child." Judge Bennett folded his hands. "Miss Woodward?" Patricia stood. "We would like to call Lily Brennan." The courtroom shifted slightly. Even Blackwell seemed surprised. Judge Bennett looked down at the small girl. "Are you comfortable speaking, Lily?" She nodded. A bailiff helped her step up onto the witness stand so she could reach the microphone. Her legs dangled slightly above the floor. Blackwell studied her carefully. Children were unpredictable witnesses. Patricia approached gently. Lily, she said softly, can you tell the court what happens when Derek gives your mom pills? Lily thought for a moment. She sleeps. How long? Sometimes all day. And what does Derek do while she's asleep? Lily's hands folded together in her lap. He watches TV. And? The girl hesitated. Then she spoke quietly. He comes into my room. The silence inside the courtroom became absolute. Blackwell stepped forward quickly. Objection, Your Honor. Leading testimony from a minor. Judge Bennett held up a hand. Overruled. Continue. Patricia nodded. Lily, did you tell anyone about this before today? Yes. Who? My neighbor. What happened? She said I was making stories. Patricia nodded slowly. And your teacher? She said Derek was a good man. Patricia turned toward the judge. No further questions. Blackwell approached the stand. He crouched slightly to meet Lily's eyes. Lily, he said gently, sometimes children imagine things when they're scared. Lily didn't respond. Blackwell continued softly. Is it possible you misunderstood something Derek did? Lily looked at him carefully. Then she said something that made several reporters glance up from their notebooks. Do you have kids? Blackwell blinked. That's not relevant. Do you? Lily repeated. Yes. Then you know when kids are scared, she said. Blackwell's voice tightened. Yes. Lily tilted her head slightly. Do your kids lie when they're scared? Blackwell didn't answer. Judge Bennett leaned back slightly. Patricia watched quietly. Lily continued. I was scared every night. Her voice stayed steady, but I wasn't confused. Across the room, Derek shifted in his chair. For the first time, the polished confidence in his expression slipped. Blackwell stood slowly. No further questions. Judge Bennett removed his glasses. He studied Lily for a long moment. Then he looked toward the attorneys. I believe the court has heard enough testimony for today. His voice carried authority that silenced the entire room. However, he continued, one matter remains. His gaze moved toward Derek Thornton. Mr. Thornton, you will now answer several questions directly from the court. For the first time that day, Derek Thornton looked nervous. For the first time since the hearing began, Derek Thornton no longer looked comfortable. Judge Bennett rested his folded hands on the bench and studied him carefully. Mr. Thornton, the judge said calmly, I want to revisit the prescriptions found in the residence. Derek straightened in the witness chair. As I already explained, Your Honor, those belong to friends. Judge Bennett nodded slightly. Yes, I heard that explanation. He looked toward Patricia Woodward. Miss Woodward, you mentioned earlier that these medications were not registered to the mother. Patricia stood and approached the evidence table. Yes, Your Honor. She held up one of the orange pill bottles in a sealed evidence bag. These medications were filled under 3 different names. Judge Bennett glanced toward Derek. Would you like to clarify that? Derek forced a polite smile. As I said, they belong to acquaintances. Before the judge could respond, the courtroom doors opened quietly. Officer Ryan Foster stepped inside. He carried a thin folder. Apologies for the interruption, Your Honor, Ryan said. Judge Bennett raised an eyebrow. You have new information? Yes, sir. Ryan walked to the evidence table and handed the folder to Patricia. She opened it. Her eyes moved quickly across the pages. Then she looked up. Your Honor, she said, these are records from California. A faint ripple moved through the courtroom. Patricia continued. They document 3 previous police reports filed against Mr. Thornton by former partners. Blackwell stood immediately. Objection. Those allegations were never prosecuted. Judge Bennett nodded. Noted. He turned back to Patricia. Continue. Patricia read carefully. In each case, the complaint describes the same behavior pattern. She paused briefly. Isolation of the partner from friends and family. Another page turned. Prescription medication misuse. Another. Financial dependency created through control of bank accounts. The courtroom remained silent. Patricia closed the folder. The final complaint describes physical intimidation. Blackwell stepped forward again. Your Honor, none of those accusations resulted in criminal charges. Ryan Foster spoke quietly from beside the table. Because Mr. Thornton relocated shortly afterward. Every eye in the room turned toward Derek. The polished composure he had rebuilt earlier was beginning to crack again. Judge Bennett leaned slightly forward. Mr. Thornton. Yes, Your Honor. Did you leave California following those complaints? Derek cleared his throat. My job transferred me here. And that transfer occurred how soon after the last report? Derek hesitated. A few weeks. The judge made a small note. Blackwell attempted to redirect the conversation. Your Honor, past allegations are not proof of wrongdoing in this case. Judge Bennett didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked toward Ryan again. Officer Foster, anything further? Ryan nodded once. There is one more matter. He turned toward the courtroom gallery. Ma'am, you can come in now. The doors opened again. A woman stepped inside. She looked nervous. Her hands were clasped tightly together. Patricia recognized her immediately. Ms. Elena Ramirez, Ryan said. A whisper moved through the audience. Elena approached the witness stand slowly. She glanced once toward Derek. His expression had gone rigid. Ms. Ramirez, Ryan said gently. Can you tell the court why you're here? Her voice trembled slightly. I lived with Derek 2 years ago. Blackwell moved instantly. Your Honor, this is turning into character assassination. Judge Bennett held up a hand. Sit down, Mr. Blackwell. He looked at Elena. Please continue. Elena nodded. He did the same things, she said quietly. The pills, the isolation. She swallowed. He told everyone I was unstable. Her eyes shifted toward Lily. I believed him at first. The room stayed completely still. But then, Elena continued softly, I found messages from other women. Blackwell sighed heavily but remained seated. Elena's voice steadied. When I tried to leave, he told people I was addicted to medication. Patricia stepped forward. Did you report it? Yes. And what happened? He moved. The courtroom fell silent again. Elena looked toward Derek. He always moved. Judge Bennett sat back slowly in his chair. The pattern was becoming very clear. 3 reports in California. 1 here. Different women. The same story. He looked down at Lily sitting quietly beside Griffin. The child had not interrupted, had not cried. She simply watched. Judge Bennett removed his glasses again. Mr. Thornton, he said. Derek's lawyer leaned toward him urgently. But it was too late. The judge was already speaking. You described yourself earlier as someone trying to help this family. Derek said nothing. Judge Bennett continued. And yet multiple individuals across different states describe identical behavior patterns. He paused. The court cannot ignore that. Blackwell stood again. Your Honor, we are drifting far from the custody matter. On the contrary, the judge replied calmly. This information is central to determining the safety of the child. Blackwell slowly sat down. Judge Bennett closed the folder. I will review all evidence submitted today. His gaze moved across the courtroom. Until that decision is finalized, Mr. Thornton will remain in custody pending further investigation. A low murmur spread through the room. Derek's face drained of color. The judge turned toward Lily again. His voice softened slightly. You were very brave today. Lily didn't smile. She simply nodded. Judge Bennett raised his gavel. This court will reconvene shortly for final determination. The wooden gavel struck. The sound echoed sharply through the chamber. And for the first time since the hearing began, the truth had finally started to unravel. When the courtroom reconvened, the atmosphere had changed. The earlier tension was gone. What remained was a quiet, focused anticipation. Judge Harold Bennett returned to the bench, carrying a thin stack of papers. He adjusted his glasses and looked out across the room. Every seat was filled. Reporters sat with pens ready. Community members leaned forward. Even the bikers along the wall stood a little straighter. Lily sat between Griffin and Sarah, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Mr. Button's single eye peeked from Griffin's vest pocket. Judge Bennett cleared his throat. This court has reviewed the testimony and evidence presented today. The room held its breath. The allegations regarding Mr. Derek Thornton are serious and supported by both physical evidence and multiple corroborating statements. Derek sat rigid beside his attorney. The court is therefore ordering that Mr. Thornton remain in custody pending further criminal investigation. A quiet murmur moved through the room. Judge Bennett continued. However, the immediate matter before this court concerns the welfare of Lily Brennan. His gaze moved toward the small girl. Child Protective Services has recommended temporary guardianship, while the child's mother undergoes medical treatment. Patricia Woodward nodded once. Judge Bennett looked toward Griffin and Sarah. Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell. Griffin stood. Yes, Your Honor. You have previously held a certified foster placement. Yes, sir. And you are willing to assume responsibility for Lily Brennan? Griffin glanced briefly at Sarah. Her hand rested gently on Lily's shoulder. He nodded. Yes, sir. Judge Bennett studied them both for a long moment. Then he looked back at Lily. Miss Brennan. Her feet swung slightly as she stood in the chair so she could reach the microphone. Yes, sir. Do you feel safe with Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell? Lily didn't hesitate. Yes. Do you want to stay with them while your mother recovers? Yes, sir. The judge nodded slowly. He lifted his gavel. Based on the recommendation of Child Protective Services and the testimony provided, the court hereby grants temporary guardianship of Lily Brennan to Griffin and Sarah Caldwell until further review. The gavel struck once. The sharp sound echoed across the room. For a moment, no one moved. Then the tension broke. A quiet wave of relief spread through the courtroom. Chains let out a breath he had apparently been holding for hours. Several reporters began whispering into their phones. Sarah wrapped her arms around Lily. The girl stayed very still inside the hug, as if the moment felt too big to fully understand yet. Judge Bennett looked toward them one last time. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell again. Outside the courthouse, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street. The motorcycles were still there. Row after row of chrome and steel waiting patiently. When Griffin stepped outside with Lily and Sarah, a strange silence fell across the gathered riders. No cheers. No shouting. Just respect. Chains walked forward first. Well? He asked. Griffin nodded. She's staying with us. A few riders smiled quietly. One of them tipped his helmet slightly toward Lily. The small girl looked out across the street filled with motorcycles. More than she could ever count. All of them came, she said softly. Griffin followed her gaze. Looks like it. Lily thought about that for a moment. Then she reached toward his vest. Mr. Buttons, she said. Griffin carefully pulled the teddy bear from his pocket. The worn fur looked even softer in the afternoon sunlight. He held it out to her. The deal was you get him back when you're safe. Lily took the bear slowly. Her fingers traced the crooked stitches along its side. For a moment she held it against her chest. Then she looked up at Griffin. You kept your promise. Griffin smiled slightly. Where I come from, that matters. Lily considered this. Then she did something unexpected. She placed Mr. Buttons back into Griffin's hand. Keep him, she said. Griffin blinked. I thought you wanted him back. I do, Lily said. But promises work both ways. She pointed toward the courthouse behind them. You promised to protect me. Then she looked at the long line of bikers. And they promised too. Griffin understood what she meant. The promise wasn't finished yet. He nodded slowly. All right. He tucked Mr. Buttons back inside his vest pocket. The bear's single eye peeked out once more. Lily climbed into the truck beside Sarah. As the engine started, the motorcycles around them came to life one by one. The sound rolled across the Prescott streets like distant thunder. A moving wall of chrome and leather escorting a small pickup truck down the road. Lily watched them through the window. All those people, she said quietly. Yeah, Griffin replied. She held Mr. Buttons' missing eye side toward the light. Then she leaned back against the seat. For the first time since anyone had met her, Lily Brennan finally closed her eyes and rested. Because somewhere between a broken house, a courthouse, and a line of roaring motorcycles, a promise had been kept.